Hey everyone, Irene Lyon here. Welcome to this entire world of nervous system health, healing, trauma, and all things neuroplasticity. Today I have a return guest. Rachel Martin is her name, and we talk about all these three things: nervous system health, healing, trauma, and neuroplasticity. We originally talked about 3 years ago, when she had just moved through my 12-week curriculum, SmartBody SmartMind. So I really encourage going back to that talk and listening to her story from a personal healing perspective. That is what that talk is about. She was recovering from a significant surgical intervention due to cancer, and we dive into all those pieces on that first talk. On this talk today that you're going to watch, we talk about her current role and job as a counselor at a drug and rehab facility in Mexico, and how she is blending in what she has learned through SmartBody SmartMind and in some of the more advanced mentorship she has done with me post SBSM. What I absolutely love about this conversation is how she is shifting things in these, we could say, patients, clients that she's working with at this polyvagal-informed level, but also working with the somatic physiology and connecting also to the environment. And I know to my core, and so does she, in working with these individuals, that it is essential that this information get into these facilities, into these treatment facilities, so that folks can really get to the root of their addictions. And we even talk about that. Addiction runs in her family. She has experienced addiction and has moved through this. And even with all of the experience she's had and all of it running in her family, she still does not believe in her gut, in her soul, in her cells, that it is genetic. And we talk about that. So if you have an interest in the connection between the nervous system, trauma, neuroplasticity, and addiction, maybe you are in the midst of working through your own addictions, or you work with others to help them heal, I cannot recommend this talk enough. Enjoy. Hey, Rachel.
Hi, Irene.
Let's talk.
Okay, sounds good.
Before we get into talking about your current job in addiction and all those elements, can you give people a rundown of who you are and what brought you to this work of nervous system health and regulation, please?
Sure. My name is Rachel Martin, and I found you, Irene, in 2020, right before the world went bonkers. But after my life had already kind of been whacked with a kind of near death experience. I had a rare cancer diagnosis. I had underwent a 13 and a half hour surgery, like lost half my organs, it was like, oh my gosh, what is this life, And I was seeking healing, and I don't oh, someone in my yoga community had run a course on the polyvagal theory. And I was like, oh, what is this? And learned a little bit about it. And she actually played one of your videos on like the nervous system and chronic illness. And that's what I thought I had been experiencing before my cancer diagnosis. And it was just like this, like, whoa, aha moment. And so I found you in February, and SBSM was starting in March, right? Or maybe it was February,
Yeah.
right around that time.
Mm.
And yeah, did SBSM in 2020. I had just went back to work after my time off healing, and then COVID hit, and I was out. And so I had like that whole spring to just do the work.
Yeah.
Um, and it was life changing, so life
Yeah.
changing. And I've followed you since then, been practicing since then, on and off, because when a year later, my dad died. Well, not a year later, like August of 2020, my dad died of pancreatic cancer. And that, like, I just kind of forgot everything. I didn't
Mm.
have I didn't have the capacity, I suppose, or enough regulation yet to like stick with things, and
Mhm.
I went off and kind of went into my own substance addiction.
Mm,
Um, with a, I wasn't a regular user, but I started partying with cocaine
mm,
and really liked it. Really liked
mm.
it. It just took away all the pain, and I got to be normal and have fun and forget about everything that happened. And
Right.
so I became like a weekend, couple weekends a month binge user. And then
Mhm.
I would like be up for days and like, wait, what am I doing?
Mm,
And it was about a year later that I like saw the path of addiction because my whole family, my dad
mm,
was an alcoholic addict. My sister had had opiate addiction that
mm.
she quit cold turkey like 15 years ago, I think.
Wow.
I had lost three cousins to heroin overdose. Um, Grandfather was an alcoholic, just lots of it. And so I had been around AA and 12 steps, seen my dad's journey, seen how he went from being like a monster, like the worst person ever, to super grounded,
Mm,
super spiritual. When I was in the hospital, he could stand next to my bedside, hold my hand, and I could like feel that peace within
mm.
him. And so I knew, like, I don't want to live this way. I already have all this knowledge about the nervous system, about healing from addiction. Like, I need to do something. And I started a Kundalini yoga teacher training,
Right.
got
Yeah.
out of a relationship that wasn't serving anymore, kind of
Mhm.
uprooted my life, ended up moving to Mexico in February of 2022
Mm,
and getting out of the United States, which was, like all that go, go, go. I live in a
mm.
place now where it's much quieter. I finished the Kundalini training and saw in that training, it was really powerful for me to be getting into my body more in a more gentle way than just like going to the gym. Like it worked for me, and having the understanding of the nervous system too um, was really cool. And I saw how it's lacking in the teachings of Kundalini yoga. Like they talk about, well, you're strengthening your nervous system, you're doing this, but nobody actually ever tells you, like, what is the nervous system?
Right.
They're just
They
like,
just know they have to say that.
yeah, like it's just this thing. It's this technology that's working on your nervous system and da 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 da, and you're moving energy through the chakras. But like, there's no talk about what the nervous system is and what the different states are. And I'm grateful that I had that knowledge for myself.
Yeah.
And I teach now a little bit of Kundalini. Well, it is Kundalini, but I don't do like super hardcore. I blend
Mm.
it with what I know from you, um, to so I work at a rehab facility here, drug and
Yeah. Yeah.
alcohol
Yeah.
counseling.
Yeah.
Um,
I want
and
to I want to get into that, but I want to ask a couple questions just for timeline. So you got into the SBSM nervous system work through me,
mhm.
um, opened kind of your awareness to that stuff because we did a chat.
Can't remember when we did that interview. I can see the beautiful bouquet of flowers that you sent after.
Well, it's been a bit, so the timeline we're a little confused about. It's not important,
Well, I
but
mean, if it was, I mean, I hid that part of my life, like the addiction. Like it's not something, right? I mean, I don't know, most addicts do.
yeah,
Like I wasn't proud of it. I knew better. I
yeah,
didn't want to be doing that, but I found relief
of course.
in it.
Well, like you said, pain.
Yeah.
And I remember watching the biopic series Dope Sick. Did you watch that with Michael Keaton?
I have not.
Ah, so there's a part, it is very good. It's intense, but it's also real, as you would know. And there's a part where the main Sackler guy, he's like the evil guy in the show who's pushing the oxy and
Hmm.
making sure that the company and the drugs keep getting out.
This is a fictional one, right? Because there's two, someone's mentioned another series to me, but I think it's like more like documentary. Is Dope Sick a
Dope Six
fiction?
documentary.
It
I
is
mean,
doc.
it's a biopic, and I'm sure there's elements of it that are shifted, but it's a fairly good representation of how the opioid crisis began in the East, in the coal mining towns, where people were in a lot of pain from all of their accidents and things that would happen if you're in those sorts of jobs. But I actually have it somewhere on my phone where the main Sackler person was talking about how he just wants to take all the pain away from the world. And the way that he says it, and the guy is portrayed as quite not there. Like tons of dysregulation. Clearly, one might say verging on sociopathic. I can't define sociopath, but it had that creepy, eerie,
Hmm.
this guy will do anything for power and to help people. And I really do feel that he wanted pain to be gone in the world. But when I heard it, it was like he wants his pain
Hmm.
to be gone. And he was kind of the runt of the family and the joke of the family, and just wasn't that character that, had he wasn't, Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible, who was like able to do everything. He kind of
Hmm.
had that sort of pathetic, you could say, archetype.
Hmm.
And I remember hearing that, I'm like, wow, that's really intense. But he's right. There's so much pain in the world. So what better way than to give someone a prescribed drug that's okay because the doctor is giving it to you, and yet it's completely addictive and it's destroyed so many lives.
So much to say about that. I mean,
Please.
I had my own experience with opiates
Yeah,
after my surgery,
right.
which I had three cousins die of heroin fentanyl overdoses. So
Mhm.
I was on life support, I was tied down, and I heard the nurse say to give me more fentanyl. And I just like, I was like shaking in my bed and trying to like, no, no, don't give that to me. I don't want
Mhm.
it. Well, you need it for the pain. You have too much pain. Your epidural was placed wrong, da da da. So I
Oh,
had to have it. And so I was in the hospital for 15 days, a lot of that time being given some kind of opiate, fentanyl, Dilaudid, morphine,
mhm.
whatever, and then sent
Mhm.
home with OxyContin. And,
Mm.
um, you know, taking my pills, and then I'd start to get this like, oh, I just wouldn't feel good. And it felt
Yeah.
like someone was taking like a steel wool to my aura. That's how I describe it. And like
Mhm.
my bones hurt, and
Mhm.
and I remember my boyfriend at the time saying, like, I don't think this is pain from the surgery. Like, I think these are withdrawals. And I was so fucking pissed. I was
Mhm.
so like, what? And those were the worst. That was so weird to go through
Yeah.
that. It was like the flu times a million.
Yeah.
There was no comfort in that. Like
Yeah.
it was hard. And I
Yeah.
was really, really mad at my doctors. And my surgeon told me, well, the pharmaceutical reps told us that if you're taking it legitimately for pain, you you'll be okay. You're not going to get addicted. And I was like,
That's
you
such
believe
BS.
that?
Yeah. Wow.
What?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's that, and then with that character wanting to like take away the pain of the
Yes.
world, really wanting to take away his pain,
Yep.
taking away his pain by gaining power,
Hmm.
right? Like that addiction. He has his addiction to power,
Yes.
and Gabor Mate has a great talk about that, the power of addiction and the addiction to power.
Mm.
I really enjoy that. And then this idea that we should be able to take away all the pain from the world.
Can't.
I just don't. Pain is to me, and I've been through a lot of pain the last few years. I've avoided pain a lot of my life, but pain is part of living.
It
Death is
is.
part of life. Like it's inseparable.
Mhm.
And it's that like not knowing how to move through the pain, not for me, my experience, like it not being okay to feel the pain and then have someone there to help me move through it and regulate.
Yeah.
Right? I did
Yeah.
not get that when I was a kid.
I was just thinking about that. because one of the classic examples I teach, and you've heard this probably a million times, is when you're a kid and you fall and you scrape your knee, off your bicycle or something, which happens to all of us. It's in some way, shape, or form. Depending on how your caregiver responds to that, you get an imprint as to how to deal with an uncomfortable sensation, which is essentially what pain is.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time that would occur, and I'm being very general here, generalizing, it would be, oh, you're fine, get up, keep going, get back on your bike, And having hurt myself as an adult, having scraped or cut myself as an adult with regulation, even the tiniest little cut or the tiniest little burn from steam from your kettle, for example, it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
You bang your elbow on something, it hurts. And think of those little kids, this, but this is for people listening, who are told when it's like, let's say this is the first time you've hurt yourself as a human, and you feel this rush of stinging pain, there'd be adrenaline, survival energy, and your primary caregiver, who you look up to and should be a model for what to experience, says, you're fine. No, you're not fine. But that's been kind of a common script,
Mm-hmm.
or the opposite is the devouring, let's say, mother that freaks out, scoops the kid up, and puts more stress into their system,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to what we know, and and all the students know, when that occurs, you stay connected, but you don't interfere with the processing of sensations. And when the child finally looks to you, then you scoop them up, then you kiss the boo-boo, then as opposed to one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And that I am convinced, Rachel, that if that tone could be set at the beginning, as simplistic as that sounds, the world of addiction would be completely different.
100%. I think I believe that too.
So, well, I'm glad, first of all, I'm really glad you're okay and you moved out of that.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. Thank you. It's wild to think about what I've been through over the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
And here I am. Some
And
days I don't even really remember it, like
yeah.
it's not become a part of it is part of who I am, but it doesn't define me. And you kind of talk about that, like we need to want to heal and not see ourselves as a victim,
Yeah.
and for a while I hung on to the story of all the things that happened to me, and that was that letting myself be completely defined by the things that happened, instead
Mm-hmm.
of like living in the now in the moment with
Mm-hmm.
like, what do I have? What can I do?
Mm-hmm.
What am I here? How can I learn from this? And
Mm-hmm.
then bring that to the world as my medicine and service. And the way that pain is handled in my work in addiction. So I'm a drug and
Yes.
alcohol counselor.
Let's talk about
And
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I had I had a situation recently where I'm working with a client who's very shut down, very
Mm-hmm.
rigid, there are days when like, like posture's down, eyes down, no, like hardly any energy in his voice and all of that. And um I'm supposed to be going through these Narcotics Anonymous workbooks with them. Most of
Right.
my sessions, I'm like, I can't do this because he's not here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I just sit and come into connection. How's the day? Oh, look at the bees on the flowers, like using
Mm-hmm.
orienting in like
Mm.
a, a sneaky way. I'm not
Yeah.
saying like,
Yeah.
let's orient to the flowers on the rosemary.
Never
Winging
worked.
it. Yeah. Um, so anyway, I can talk more about that, but the thing I wanted to say is
Yeah.
he had a moment where something finally got in and he was starting to feel something.
Mm.
And it was in the evening, I was getting ready to leave the facility, and one of our guards came and grabbed me and said, "Hey, like this person is sitting here. He refused to come take his medication. I don't know what to do."
Mm.
And I got up there, and one of our nurses was there, had gotten him to take his medication, and I noticed that he was crying. And
Mm.
so inside, I'm like, hallelujah, like he's feeling something, he's expressing something.
Yeah, yeah.
And she's sitting there, rubbing his back, it's okay, it's
Oh,
okay. And she says, do you want a cigarette? And I was like, no, no, no. Because even though we're an addiction treatment center,
yeah.
everybody there smokes,
Smokes and
and
drinks a
it's,
lot of coffee, probably. Yeah.
yeah, and once
Yep.
there's sugar, right,
Yep.
like to
Yeah.
transfer things
Yep.
that they're looking for to regulate their nervous system or find that comfort, I should say, take
Yeah.
them to the place they want to be since their
Yeah.
drug of choice is out of question.
Yeah.
And I was just like, ah. And in that moment, I kind of froze. I froze.
Yeah.
And because the mama bear in me wanted to be like, what are you doing? Don't do that. But I also didn't want to upset him further.
Mhm.
In hindsight, I wish I would have said, like, Brian, I think a cigarette sounds great. Maybe we can do that in a little bit. That
Yeah.
way I could have held the space for him to deepen into that emotion.
Mhm.
But he got that cigarette
And it all went
and
away.
it all went away.
Yeah.
Like sucked it back in, pushed it down,
Mm.
and it was
Mhm.
gone. And so it's
Mhm.
like these little things, and
Mhm.
the nurse meant well, but
Of course.
she just wanted his pain to go away.
Of
She
course.
just wanted him to be okay so she could
Yeah.
be okay. And that
Yeah.
happens in other group sessions. Someone starts
Mm.
crying, and this is a pet peeve of mine. If I'm crying, I hate it when somebody offers me a tissue or like comes over immediately to like hug and
Mhm.
soothe, like you were saying with that mother that like
Yeah.
comes in.
Yeah.
It's like there's a time and a place for it, but when I'm working with people, like I just sit and hold that space
Yeah.
for that to come through and let them know like it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead, cry, get snotty,
Yeah.
like let it out.
Yeah. Have the tissue on the table and they reach for it.
They reach for it
Yeah.
when they're ready.
Yeah. Exactly. It's like
And
trying to force feed someone who's not hungry. It's like they're not reaching for the food. Don't try to give it to them.
yeah, yes, yes.
You were gonna say something. I cut you off there.
Um, well, and with the touch,
Hmm.
or like going in for a hug for someone, I feel like, or I think, I've been noticing where I say I feel like versus it's not a
Think.
real feeling.
It's a
Anyway,
thought. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I notice there's like a cue that they give, and I don't know if I sense it in my body or if I'm just orienting to it when they're ready for that.
Yeah.
Like when like I can see the hunger in them for more of that
Connection.
connection.
Mm. My sense from that, my experience in working with people, and this is just how I would experience it. It's like the armor that was there isn't on anymore, and they're a bit raw, a bit more exposed. And it's kind of like you don't have that armor anymore. It's like something's missing, and then that's where that connection. But if you try to hug someone who still is in process and has a little protection and armor, what's going to happen if you go in without it'll get bigger, right?
Yeah,
Or a defense will come out, a fight will
yeah,
come out. Or like if you see kids that don't want to be touched, they'll do that, right? They'll pull away, because they're a little less frozen. They're not just sitting there frozen. Okay, yeah, sure, you can hug me, but it's like the kid that's told go hug your aunt, and you don't want to hug your aunt, but you do
mm,
it because you've just been told to do it, right? Just all these
mhm.
little
There's
things.
that like ugh,
Ugh.
bristliness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that with my clients and with between clients too, because that we were in a group setting, and so
Hmm.
someone might get upset, and the person next to him starts to, go in for them, and they kind of, uh, and I'm learning how to work with that. Like, hey, maybe we can let her have her moment,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Being okay with the discomfort.
uh-huh.
It's happening in the whole field, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I'm thinking about one of the classic Peter Levine kind of quotes from my trainings, and he would say, pain is trapped sensation.
Mm-hmm.
Pain is trapped sensation. And back to the kid who scraped the knee or fell off their bike, like that sensation that they're feeling. The word pain is just our word for sensation of different valence, like
Right.
small sensation, big sensation, scary sensation, fear that's connected with that sensation. I want to know, you've met before we started recording, we mentioned the AANA and just those, it's very cognitive. And I have not gone through any AA or NA training or for myself in particular, but I've heard some people will just, it's like almost like a Bible,
Mm-hmm.
and it's their 10 commandments, and it helps them clearly because they've got things under control. But I remember my main SE teacher, Steve Hoskinson, he said there's actually should be 13 steps. I don't remember what the 13th step was, but it was something like what we need after 12 steps.
Yes.
So I'd be
Yes.
curious to know how would you interpret that? Because I do feel that he would say this keeps us in control, which is good because we're not going to go around harming and hurting people or ourselves. We don't want to be out of control. Being in control is good, but then the real regulation is being able to let go of control
Mm-hmm.
and live and be in flow. So I'd like to hear your experience either from your own personal or working with your students, clients, patients, I don't know what you would call them.
Clients, patients.
People.
Sometimes I call them my kids
Yeah, yeah,
because
for
that's what it
sure.
feels like.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I love that. And I too had this feeling like there should be a 13th step. And I thought
Mm-hmm.
about like creating something based on that. And then I learned in 12-step circles, there's already something called the 13th step. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like sleeping with your fellows. So that's not a name that I'm gonna go with. But there definitely needs to be, or in my opinion, there's this space for something after the 12 steps are worked. And the 12 steps are like this spiritual framework for living. And in AA, they call the big book is like the book. It is like the Bible. And these
Right.
12 steps are like the 12 commandments. And um, the 12-step framework is actually based in biblical
Okay.
mm, terms, and I'm not super well versed in that. We just had a speaker at our rehab that spoke to that and kind of offended some people, which
Mm-hmm.
is interesting because it's, just the history. And anyway, I won't go down that path, but um, it's it's like this design for living, spiritual principles, honesty, openness, willingness, surrender, and service, um, confession,
Mm-hmm.
all these things that help to like start to organize a life and clear out the wreckage of the past
Mm-hmm.
and sort of see what's going on, but there's no, and then you're supposed to live it and take it
Right.
into action and walk the talk.
Mm-hmm.
um, but in AA and NA especially, there's this focus on all the things that we've done and our character defects. And I don't
Mm.
like the term character defects because it's like there's something wrong with you, so
Broken.
there's like
Yeah.
more shame, and
Mm-hmm.
there's already so much shame underneath that none of that gets like dealt with.
Mm-mm.
It just gets managed. Things get managed. So people get control. The addictions kind of go out into other places: tobacco, sugar, food, relationships. Like none of it gets into like what's really happening or the nervous system. There's no
Mm-hmm.
body. in it.
Hmm.
There's no body. And it says we're recovering from a hopeless state of body, mind, and spirit. And
Hmm.
there's some spirituality in it, like you have to find a higher power, become willing to turn your life and your will over to this higher power. There's the mind. Well, I'm looking at all these things and I'm getting this understanding, but they don't address the body.
Yeah, it kind of
And
leaves you out of it. If you're giving yourself to a higher purpose, or sorry, a higher God, which if someone wants to do that, that's their choice. But again, it's not giving you the driver, like it's not putting you at the front of the bus as the driver of your own system,
mm-hmm.
which it seems like that's the part that keeps people in trouble because they don't know how to drive their own vehicle. They don't have the manual to their own vehicle. They're giving that away to, we could say, dare I say, these ideologies. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I mean, I was raised Catholic, so I know I can't name the Ten Commandments, but I get it, you know. But I also know that if someone was attacking me, I might kill them in
Mm-hmm.
self-defense, you know. So it's sort of like, at what point at what point does biology kind of overtake some of these rules that we have? But then, yes, of course, be kind to your neighbor, service. It's kind of it's a bit, it's like it's tricky and sticky when we have these laws and these rules.
Yeah, it is tricky and sticky, and there's a bypassing
Mm,
component to it. And I saw this with my dad.
okay.
When he got diagnosed, he was just joking about it, and like I was angry, and he's like, "Well, like there's no reason to be angry." And I'm like, "Well, but I am angry, you know?" Like and and anger is seen as like
Right.
this kind of evil thing in the program. Like, well, then there's gonna be resentment, da, 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 da. But there's
Mm,
like actually is this feeling of it, and it serves a purpose. So I think that my dad just like, well, I can't get angry. That'll lead me down a path of relapse or whatever. So I'm
mhm,
just gonna like ignore that, ignore that, ignore
mhm,
that. I
mhm.
mean, I think maybe sometimes he dealt with it, but he also ate a whole lot of sugar, you
Right.
know. He also was
Right.
smoking cigarettes for a lot of his life. It's like
Right.
there's no like it's be a good person, live this way, right? It's that good person thing
Mm,
rather than being with what is and learning how to be with what is and honor all the things that are, even the uh, bad things,
bad emotion, the
the
negative
bad
emotions.
emotions,
Yes.
the undesirable, which of course, like you and I know, like there there is no bad emotion. There is
Mhm,
no like bad sensation. It might be unpleasant, and even that
mhm,
can just be a perception. What is
mhm,
unpleasant to me might not be unpleasant to you. It's
mhm. That's why I
just
don't do trigger warnings,
oh right, yeah,
because one person's trigger might make the other another person be like, "So what?"
right. That
Um,
came up in one of my 12-step groups actually
did it?
recently. Like,
Ah,
this is not, you're making this not a safe space for me. And I was
mm,
like, well, guess what? Life is inherently unsafe, and coming to terms with that is our work. And your trauma, your triggers are not the groups to work around and bubble
yeah,
wrap you in.
yeah.
That is where the work is
Hmm.
in growth.
Hmm. So let me just be clear, because this is a learning for me too, which is why I was excited to talk to you. In AA or NA, there's no acceptance of healthy aggression. Or is that too blatant of a statement?
I don't know if from what I've seen,
Yep.
from what I've seen, um, it's not talked about. It's seen as bad.
Hmm.
And again, I've only been really in the work for myself for like 2 years, a year and a half
Mhm.
probably in the
Mhm.
step work. And I brought a lot of my own learnings to it. And so
Mhm.
I've maybe not been as, are you lowering your blinds?
Yeah, I'm like, do
I was
you
like,
see I was being blinded by the sun? Higher power was coming through the window. Yeah, I didn't expect you to not notice that.
the healthy aggression. Oh, someone who like was in like the depths of addiction, came
Mhm.
to this, found their peace through it, probably has more of a connection to it and less of a acknowledgement of this like
Mhm.
missing piece or thing that isn't
Mhm.
right than I do. Or and
Mhm.
then maybe someone who's been in it longer has seen where no, like healthy aggression actually is
Right.
okay or talked about, but I don't think so. I don't think so. And what I've
Mm.
seen at the rehab is
Mhm.
when clients start to have this like sympathetic energy
Yeah.
coming up and they have their outbursts, they're taken, they're told that's not okay. They're maybe even given a shot or a pill to calm down or
Right.
something to make it go away rather than like, okay, like something's coming alive, something's coming up. How do we
Mhm.
hold space and like facilitate this movement?
Mhm.
And I had a client who had some outbursts, and the guards came in and they're holding him back, and I had to tell him like, please take your hands off of him. Like, I have this. I
Mhm.
have this. I was, there with him, and eventually, like, he made eye contact, and I, just took a deep breath and
Yeah.
looked at him, and like I sat down in the chair in front of him, and then he sat down in his chair, and everything was okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just needed to
It needed to come out.
needed to come out.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's like school all over again. We're trying to, oh, you
Right.
have to do these things, you have to follow this order.
Mm. So this is interesting because one of my mentors, coaches, not too long ago, said to me, you've really got to get this work into the drug and rehab facilities. And I don't know where he got this information from, but he is involved in a lot of things, and he's in the United States. And he said, from what I know, a lot of the funding, a lot of the philanthropists and capital money going into these high-end retreat centers, it's being pulled because it looks as though nothing is actually helping. Like
Mm.
people relapse, they come back, and he said you need to get your work into these centers. So when you told me when we cut up over text a few months ago, I was thrilled to hear that you were bringing this work in. Do you think, Rachel, that like this is something that could start to, in a good way, infiltrate these places, or is it going to take like some groundbreaking case study or like something? I don't know, like because it feels like a lot of the folks that come into the nervous system work. I'll set the stage for what I'm about to say. They're like, oh my God, this has to get into education. This has to get into the doctor's office. This nurses need to know this. Teachers have to know this. Firemen, first responders, and now addiction drug rehab facilities. They need to know this. And we know this because these addictions and these are rooted in childhood trauma. And what does someone with lots of childhood trauma that where it's unresolved have? Tons of survival stress.
Mhm.
So that's what he had said. Of course, I was like, let's talk. We're talking. What's your editorial on how this might change? Like from what you're seeing, are you the weirdo doing stuff here, or are people kind of seeing that what you're doing is working for a lot of people?
Well, I think that I can say my sponsor sees that what I'm doing is working for me. She's
Mm-hmm.
gotten into some yoga and stuff. She's learning from me. At
Mm-hmm.
the rehab, they were a little like, I don't know about doing this yoga stuff, but it's something's working with it. So now I'm
Right.
teaching 5 days a week with this work.
Mm,
I was really shocked to see that the therapist that I'm working with there had never heard of polyvagal theory. Shocked, but not shocked, right?
mm,
Like I've encountered this with other therapists,
right.
and um, we did hire just now two new therapists, and they're
Mm,
young, like 23 and 25.
mm,
And I was kind of making my argument for bringing my slack line to the rehab because I see a whole way of teaching the 12 steps on the slack line and helping tap into the nervous system through that.
yeah.
And she said, "Have you heard of polyvagal theory?" And I was like, "Oh, I love you." Like instant, like, yes, you.
Yes.
And so
Good.
she hasn't done like SC training or anything like that, but she has a little bit of knowledge in her own
Mhm.
experience with healing her early childhood trauma. And so
Right.
she's bringing that in from the therapy side and starting to share that with the therapist. So I see like there's this sort of like grassroots
Mhm.
movement, at least within the space that I'm in.
Mhm.
And I mean, we're kind of small. We
Right.
have 5 therapists, 5 counselors, and 28 clients right
Mhm.
now.
Mhm.
And it's a little different because we're a lockdown facility, which means people can't leave. Whereas most rehabs, I think all rehabs in the States, they can sign themselves out.
Right.
And so, of course, people are going to be leaving because as soon as it gets too uncomfortable and
I'm
they
out.
don't, yeah, they're out. Um,
Mm,
so I don't know what it'll take to get it into the bigger picture.
mhm.
Um, young, like the old therapist dying, right? Like how it goes in science, right? Like the
I
old regime going
it's
out.
it's so true. I gotta, okay, we're gonna just pop up a quote I sent to a colleague the other day because this goes really well. This is a quote from um, a theoretical physicist, and then I said, and a blunt human being when I quoted Max Planck, and he says, a new scientific truth or cultural practice does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather its opponents eventually die and a new generation grows up that is familiar with it.
Hmm.
And I'll never forget, Rachel, when I was young in my Feldenkrais career, I was so like, everybody needs to know this. We need to get this in here, here, and now we need to change the trainings because the trainings aren't doing this. And I just see all these things really quickly. And Jerry Karzan, who is still alive to this day, who was Moshe Feldenkrais's assistant forever, said to me, he said, Irene, in his kind of New York accent, you know, I can't do a New York accent, so I'm not
No,
even going to
I was
pretend.
waiting for it.
But he's like, you just got to wait for all us old people to die. And honestly, like I kind of, I'm like, I think you're right. Um, like there is a changing of a guard that is slowly happening. Um, and I don't know if some of these institutions can be fixed. I just think they need to crumble and new ones need to be built.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I don't know that they can be fixed. They need to crumble. And
Mm,
I had that feeling going into the rehab, like, I need to let everybody know about polyvagal theory. Maybe we
right,
should have a training on it. Maybe we should talk about this
right.
CPTSD. Like, and then it's like,
You-
no, I just need to live it. I
Yeah,
just need to be it because that's undeniable. People can feel it, people
yeah.
can sense it. There's something about, they even say this in A, like, find the person who has what you want and
Mm,
follow them. And so, in being that frequency, like, people don't necessarily know, but they're like, okay, well, there's something you're doing there, so we're gonna like let it happen, which
yeah.
is much more like accessible to creating change than someone coming in and going, here's all the things that you're doing wrong,
Here's the new
and let
book.
me tell you
Yeah,
how you can fix it, which was
yeah,
my approach for a lot of my life in
yeah,
my
yeah,
family,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it didn't work.
yeah. Yeah, and that's coupled with obviously frustration when we know that there are some real key things that could just shift the boat just a tiny bit over.
Mhm.
Um,
I think that one of the hardest things that we're going to face, even as this comes into being, like this, nervous system work, the regulation, and dealing with early childhood trauma, is the fact that we're still medicating people
yeah,
so much.
yeah,
And that I see this with some of the clients that are having difficulty accessing feeling. It's like,
hmm,
well, how many SSRIs or benzos or what are they on? Like, we're
hmm,
trying to do this work and they're numbed out
yeah,
pharmaceutically.
yeah,
And in AANA, they say, like, you can never take a mind altering substance again once you're an addict. And, like, okay, I have some different views, but
yes,
like, there's no asterisk in the book, but I guess there should be, that says, unless it's prescribed by a doctor, and even if there's no actual proven research that it works,
yeah, exactly,
you know.
exactly. And I get that question a lot. Someone will ask often, can I heal my nervous system if I'm on meds, meaning pharmaceutical, psychiatric meds? And of course, I can't tell them what to do, and of course that's between them and their doctor, but there is such confusion. And yeah, it's going to be hard to find your true authentic biology when you are taking any form of substance that alters where you are being impacted. Even sleeping pills, will,
Or birth control.
well, that's a whole other, yeah, birth control is a whole other one that I'm not even going down that rabbit hole. I never was really on it. So, but I've heard horror stories of withdrawal and what occurs when a person starts to heal from the after effects of that through some naturopathic doctor friends of mine.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, the general consensus that I've seen is sure you can use something to try to stabilize yourself, but eventually you need to not be on those to access your true biology. And for some people, that might seem like light years away because they've been on stuff for so long and their chemistry doesn't know how to work without it. And I've worked with people who have gotten off of benzos, but holy hell, is it a journey to get off of those for a lot of people. And it comes with, when you were mentioning the withdrawal symptoms from the opioids, that's exactly what my clients who were getting off of benzodiazepines would say. It felt like their bones were on fire. Their fascia and skin was crumbling and so tight and painful. And exactly what you said.
It's so horrible. And I hear the benzo withdrawals are even worse than
Than
opiates,
heroin. I've,
more
I've heard that.
dangerous
Yeah,
too.
I've heard
Yeah.
that.
And I have a friend right now who's detoxing off SSRIs, and he wasn't even on them for that long, but
Hmm.
he's getting brain zaps. He just
Yes.
gets these brain zaps. And along with that, he's like, I cried the other day. Like, I just
Uh,
cried. It's like
right.
I can cry again. I wasn't crying. I'm like,
Right.
well, that's great.
Good.
It's really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my sister is going through a hard time. She had been addicted to opiates, like, it was like 12, 15 years ago.
Hmm.
But then she was on SSRIs for most of her life.
Hmm.
And it's like they're doing more harm than good
Hmm.
now. They're not really helping.
Hmm.
And I just, I wish I could
I
tell her
know.
all the things that I know,
Yeah.
but it's so scary for her to think another way, to even come to terms with the fact that maybe these things aren't helping, or like, how could the doctors have done harm?
Mhm.
You know, there's so much trust put in MDs.
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't
Yeah.
have them anymore, but
Yeah. And for anyone who's listening to this who's getting a little depressed, mad, angry that we're talking about this, yeah, that makes sense because for most of us, we didn't know. The doctors didn't know. Some still don't know.
hmm
Um, I remember interviewing one of your SBSM peers. Her name was Holly, and I'll make sure to link it. But she suffered an attack, a physical attack, when she was, I think, a late teen or early 20s, had tons of PTSD. They put her on benzos. And the short of the story is she had more PTSD, complex PTSD from the benzos than the actual attack.
hmm
And it took her a long time to get off, and she got off and tapered alongside the nervous system work. So that's what I want to say is one can get off of these, but you need a multifaceted approach. You have to look at minerals and diet and rest and
hmm
keeping your body moving and all the things along with medical supervision, and because you do not want to go off these things cold turkey. from
Definitely
what
not.
from what I've heard, I know of people who have, and they are a different kind of human to be able to do that. I have a military friend who went off of opioids cold turkey after a broken neck, and he was on them, and he just was like, I'm just gonna stop. And he did it, and he went through the shakes and withdrawals for 2 weeks, and then he called his doctor, and she's like, "You did what?" Or the nurse. He's like, I couldn't. I have kids to take care of. Like, I had to get off of them.
How long was he on them? Do you know?
Probably not that long. I think it was more acute from the accident and the surgery. It wasn't like 5 years or 2 years. It was probably for a few months.
Yeah, that's how I was. And I did cold turkey. My boyfriend was like, you should taper. We can start like cutting your pills. But we cut a pill and I tried to swallow it. My body wouldn't, like, I kept choking on it.
Because it was cut.
I don't know if it was cut, but I just
Yeah.
took it. I was like, my body doesn't want it. I don't
Right.
want it. I don't want these in
Right.
me. So
Right.
I did cold turkey and
It was
it's
intense.
rough.
Yeah.
But I was so just sure that I did not want to have any association with them any longer. And I was not on them for like that long.
Hmm.
And I hear it's really dangerous to do that with benzos for anyone listening
Yes.
and
Do
can be
not.
very
Do not.
complicated with
Do not.
SSRIs and whatnot.
I'll link. I don't know this woman directly, but I do follow her on Instagram. She's a psychiatrist.
Dr. Kendra?
Kendra, have you had any
Yeah.
connection with her?
Not personally, but I really love her stuff. Maybe I found her through you?
Maybe.
I don't
I'll
know.
link her stuff, but she's like a full-on psychiatrist
Yeah,
that
like
left.
Columbia trained.
Yeah. And she basically helps people without meds or gets them off.
Right.
So we'll be sure to link her up. Again, I can't vouch for her effectiveness, but from what I can tell, she's pretty hip, pretty up with it, and she clearly cares about getting people off these meds.
Right. And she had her own experience with it,
Yes.
which I think is something that makes a difference. And that's why, so at the rehab, we have therapists,
Hmm.
psychologists, and we have counselors. Because
Hmm.
there's no replacement for being able to connect with someone who's walked through a healing and
Hmm.
can relate. You
Hmm.
know, like therapists, psychologists, great. They've got all this book knowledge and they've studied, but they only like know what they think they know,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Well, and I'm seeing that right now, even in my field of study, is a lot of folks have gotten a lot of theory because there's so much information with online summits and seminars and certificate programs with theory. But there needs to be a practical component, whether you're doing the work yourself or with people. I mean, we were just talking about that before we hit record, was the difference between doing this work for yourself and then you're thrown into like real live interaction with people. It's a completely different situation.
Totally, totally different.
You want to
Um,
speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. Um, First of all, needing to be like extra attentive to my own state. Whereas when I was working from home, it was just easier. I didn't like I was tuned in, but then when working with other people and sensing what's going
Mhm.
on all around and leading group sessions, um, having this knowledge and tuning in to like, well, where are they? Can I teach this right now?
Right.
What can I do to like bring them into connection? Like, I'm not going to sit down and go like, okay, everybody, let's orient to the da 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 da. Because they're like, what? But
Yeah.
like, learning how to just bring the concepts into the everyday interaction and how can I sort of because another thing is even if I did have like a class to sit down
Mhm.
and teach this, the learning has to be really titrated
Yes.
because of where they're at and the group. Someone may have been there for 6, 7, 8 months, and somebody might only have like 18 days clean from whatever their drug of choice is. So they're still like,
Yeah.
wah, 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 wah,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And um, it's not formulaic, any of it. It's so moment to moment, and what works with one client might not work for another. You posted that Tony Robbins
Yeah.
clip that caused a lot of controversy.
Oh boy. Yes, it did.
I loved it. I loved
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And I was working with a client who had been reading a bunch of Tony Robbins,
Hmm.
just coincidentally,
Hmm.
but I did something similar with him where to
Yeah.
the outside it could have looked like I was picking on him or poking at him, but he took to it and
I
it
needed
he
it.
came into connection and he laughed
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
opened up, like it's it's unique to every person and I'm not like it's so organic. It's not in my head like, oh, I need to do this to da 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 da.
Mhm.
Like it just happens and then I notice like, oh, okay, like that. Uh-huh, uh-huh. I kind
Mhm.
of put it together later, like why that session went so well.
Yeah. From my experience when I was high level, I don't say high level, high volume in private practice, it becomes an art form, but you have the tools and the science in your back pocket or in your body. And I think that's what was so triggering for a lot of people who watched that Tony Robbins clip. And I'll be sure to post it so people can
We can revisit
go
that.
go watch. He really is a master. And I don't, I know that a bunch of stuff happened around him, but I know enough people who have been in his presence and have learned from him, who were even learning with him when he was young during NLP. And I heard through a very reputable source that he was pissing the teachers off because he was better than the teachers in his
Mm.
NLP training. So his own trauma, his own healing, his own relationships, it feeds that knowing of what to do with the person. But yeah, like some of the things that I've done in class with people, like will seem a little like one person might think that's bullying, one person might think that's funny, another person might be like, "Holy cow, I can't believe that just happened. Why did that happen? How did that happen?" And we have to remember, I think, that all humans, we're not like cattle or a herd of wolves. Like we were raised so differently
Hmm.
from our culture and our family systems that there is no one treatment for every single person that has that X problem.
Hmm.
And that's the art form of working with people. It doesn't have to be addiction. It could be chronic illness. It could be depression. It could be surgical trauma. It requires that attunement. Like you said, it doesn't work if you just sit and say, okay, everyone just orient. Because someone did that to me once when I was first learning SC, and I'm like, why? Like, why do you want me to look around? Like, there was no context, and they didn't attune to me. They didn't attune to my functionally frozen system. And it was a disaster. I left feeling angry because I'm like, what was that all about? Like, I thought she was trying to trick me into doing something,
Yeah.
you know?
It's trying to trick you.
It's like, am I gonna look and then you're gonna like do something? Like, I
Right.
don't get it.
Yeah.
But no, I'm so stoked that you're in the field applying the principles, and it's a practice. There's a reason why we call it a practice, like a medical practice, a therapeutic practice.
Yeah. A word to that is, I know you talk a lot about it can be like dangerous sometimes, people who aren't skilled in this and
Yes,
whatever, and that the most skilled people will make mistakes. Like
of course.
Peter had that incident
With
with
me.
you,
Yep.
and I can feel sometimes where I'm like, ooh, I don't know, is this, I don't really know where to go from here. I'm having trouble. Like, I don't have this next brush stroke in my
Yep.
artist toolkit. I
You
could
don't
make a
know.
misstep here. And like being comfortable with just doing the best that I can and knowing that I can't let that fear of maybe I'm not going to get it exactly right keep me from bringing what I know into practice,
Hmm.
because it is just it's a practice. And
Hmm.
also what I've seen is like not necessarily in working with like um, nervous system specific stuff or working with, well, it is working with clients, but
Hmm.
if I make a misstep, like in the 12 steps, the 10th step is like when we were wrong, we promptly admitted it.
Right.
Like I can do that. And there's always, 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 always something that comes from that
Yes.
that's like useful and I've
Yes.
learned and I've grown from or is a blessing. And I feel, I get this feeling of like gratitude for it,
Hmm.
that like, that happened exactly how it was supposed to happen,
Hmm.
actually.
Yep.
It's
Well,
really
there's
cool.
learning when that occurs, when that follow up occurs. If there
Yeah,
isn't follow up and you ignore it and pretend that you did nothing wrong, and then there's a problem,
right.
right? And that's the part that I mean, even Peter would say in our master classes, I want everybody to make mistakes this weekend or this week. Whether or not those mistakes were cleaned up and learned from, I have no idea. But even, he knows that you cannot be perfect. And I was thinking about this the other day because what you just spoke to, Rachel, is the importance of doing good work. That's really been like front and center for me. Like, what does it mean to do good work? Not perfect work. And if we think about the Hippocratic oath that medical doctors take, what is it? To do no harm. I actually think that's outdated because obviously we know there's a lot of harm done in medicine. Not all, because I'm someone who is, we both had surgeries that helped us. So
Hmm.
there's some that's good, but you can't promise that because even if you try to do good, there might be harm done because you never know the side effects of any medical intervention. But what about like let's just do really good work and do our best.
Hmm.
And so what you said about just trying, let's just try, and the fact that you're even thinking, I wonder, means that you will be fine. I say that sincerely. It's the folks that don't think that.
Hmm.
Kathy Kane would often say, when I say to myself, have I done too much? Chances are the fact that I'm saying that means that yes, I've done too much. But at least it's coming onto my radar.
Yeah.
And that's that self-reflection that I think needs to be taught, not just for people working with people one-on-one, but just personal work.
Hmm.
Like, do you need to just take a break and integrate for a while as opposed to hitting these things over and over again with a hammer? Even if it's really good somatic practices, sometimes you really need to just pause.
The pause. I'm so about the pause. And
Tell me.
another thing, well, when I'm teaching Kundalini and we're doing exercises, I always have them pause. I say it's like a snow globe. We shook up some energy and then the energy needs to like settle. There
Yep.
needs to be a pause.
Hmm.
And in the addiction work, there's like people want to get through the steps. They want to do all this. They want to, even in the programming that's created, it's like we need to work with these people and get as
Right.
much in while they're here. And I'm like, we need some space for the pause and the
Mhm.
play and
Mhm.
not, and maybe just a session where it's a group session and there is no plan. And
Yeah.
I was doing sessions like that for a while, and now we're bringing in more programming and everything needs to have an objective. And I'm like,
You don't
mm,
like, yeah, yeah, yeah.
'cause like there needs to be just some space for whatever's going to
Mhm.
arise and for someone to meet it and move with it. Like I often think of martial artists and why they're so successful is not that they're this is the move I'm going to make or I'm gonna, fight against. They're just like, this is what's happening,
Yeah.
moving with it.
There's a yielding a lot of the time, especially in practices like Aikido.
Yeah.
Aikido, right? It's about yielding, not about fighting.
Yeah.
Um, it makes me think of what you just said about having to have an objective, having to have a plan. That's parallel to how a lot of kids were raised, where there's no open space. Everything from the moment you wake up and you're eating your breakfast to going to bed at night and being tucked in, every moment is planned. Every hour is planned. There's no free time.
Mm-hmm.
Kids don't even have the ability these days to just go. I mean, I'm making a generalization, like this play date culture. It's like we just went and played. Like we didn't need to have two mothers figure out what they're going to do, when they're going to do it, who's going to be there, what are they going to eat. Oh, it's so managed.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't allow for that creative freedom, whether it's for play or for healing. So I'm gonna, yeah, fight for that open space, Rachel. That's like so important.
Oh, I am. Even the open space, like that's for like playing a volleyball game, you have to play a volleyball game. I'm like, ah, what? But it's so like you said, it's like in the culture,
Yeah.
everything's planned, everything's managed, everything has to have an objective, everything we have an addiction to production and busyness.
Mhm.
And that avoidance of just like the open space and like let's see what happens.
Let's talk about the spirituality piece as a wrap
Mm,
up, because I know
okay.
you wanted to do that, and I just did a piece on that around the connection between nervous system regulation and spirituality. Not that I was teaching spirituality, because I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
It was more the evidence, the anecdotal observations I've gotten from students who have said as they get more biological, more embodied, real regulation, there is a natural occurrence towards a bigger universal connection. So, what have you experienced maybe in your journey, and then also how you see that in recovery and addiction and in healing?
So I think connection is connection.
Hmm.
Like open is open, right? Like
Hmm.
as we do one thing is how we do all things. And for me personally, the spirit comes through breath and body. So as I'm making more space in my body, as I'm bringing more attention to my breath, as I'm opening up these places, I'm like
Hmm.
holding my diaphragms and
Yeah.
feeling them in my chair, like I have greater access to what's inside other people
Hmm.
and this access to a sense of calm
Hmm.
where I can like listen and hear and feel. And that just for me opens me to spirit, to God, to what's around me, to magic.
Hmm.
Um, and with that body piece being missing from the
Hmm.
steps, and yet also the spirituality. I mean, they say addiction is a spiritual malady.
Hmm.
Um, it's it the um I see people get a higher power and say, because they want to believe in it, but have trouble connecting to it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And people who are more, because not everyone's super like depressed or disconnected. People who do have more access to their breath and their body. I see my clients who are more open to yoga have greater success in feeling into that spirituality around them, into
Mm-hmm.
seeing, like, I often give them homework, like, where do you see a higher power at work in your life today?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and they're noticing the environment around them, like, oh, the sunset and the flowers that are blooming that weren't blooming yesterday. And I saw three birds like perched in their nests, or um, I thought about needing help and I prayed for it and then it showed up because
Mm-hmm.
they're paying attention,
Yes.
you know, and they're able to be in the present moment and have access to all of that. And none of
Mm-hmm.
that's really taught like through the steps themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the nervous system stuff for me played into that when I had my moment of like really coming to believe, which is part of the second step. Um, I had been doing nervous system work, my Kundalini yoga. My dad we had had his memorial, and I was really thinking about this and paying attention. And I had this whole experience where a woman on a plane prayed, and I did not want to go sit with this woman and her kid, but I had like this like feeling, this like intuition that was like, go sit with her. And I was like, and then someone else wanted me to move seats and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I'm just not supposed to be in this place right now. And I just like knew that. I went
Right.
and I sat with her. I connected with her.
Huh.
Her dad was an addict, all this stuff. And she said to me, Miss Rachel, why did you decide to come and sit with me? I was like, I don't know, Maria. I just felt like I should. She said, because I was praying. I was praying, God, send me an angel. And I was like, oh, what? And it was just a
Yeah.
feeling. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. N- Thank you for sharing. Well, and I think sometimes people get scared of the word God,
Yeah.
and right, and I'm not scared of it because as I learn and as I hear stories, it's what a person connects to that is bigger than them,
Yes.
and then there's all the, well, God is out there, and oh, well, God is in here. It's like whatever works for you, but the question is are you in alignment with life? That's how I kind of look at it. And do things keep going wrong, or do
Hmm.
things keep going right? Now, how do you define right and wrong? That's a whole other talk.
Hmm.
But I have found that as one becomes more connected to self, and as you said, I mean, your clients, to the environment, to the trees, the birds, the flowers, the sunset, something shifts. Like there's a ticking over that's just a little more pure and a little more effortless. Doesn't mean we're not going to feel pain or all
Hmm.
those things, right? Like that's sometimes I think the delusion is, oh, when I'm connected to this bigger source, all my pain is going to go away. Like, no.
Hmm.
Like maybe suffering changes, as they often say, right?
That's what I feel.
But I felt that, this is me personally, and again, your peers and my students, there is a psychic up leveling with others that starts to really tick over when we become more biological and clean, like regulated. Now, this doesn't mean you might not have a cup of coffee, or, I'm not saying one can't have a glass of wine. That's not, we're not doing that. But I have noticed, like Seth and I are becoming more telepathic.
Hmm.
And he'd be like, "Get out of my brain." Like, I'm not. I'm just, he's like, think I need to do this. And then I'll say, "Oh, you mean this?" And he's like, "Get out of my brain." Like we're on that level. And I was listening to, I have no idea who it was. It was something that I was flicking through on Instagram, and someone said, like back in the day before there was language, like we had to communicate telepathically. Like that is how people knew, but that's attunement.
Attunement. Yeah.
It's just attunement. It's the same way a mother knows when her baby who can't talk to her is hungry
Hmm.
or scared or there's something wrong. That's attunement.
Hmm.
Anyway, it's kind of it's something that constantly fascinates me because I do believe I don't like people saying, "Oh, that person's an empath. That person is gifted." It's like we're all fucking gifted.
I agree. And
Pardon
that
my French.
that excites me too. The
Yeah,
like feeling telepathic, and you mentioned the word alignment, which is the word I chose for me this year. Like I named my year, and the main word is alignment. To just be in alignment. And when I really like look at like what does alignment mean,
hmm.
like aligning with the sun,
Yes.
aligning with the seasons, aligning with like the deepest truth of the biology
Hmm.
of of myself and how I connect to the world. And it's like, wow, that's a big, feels like a big task because the way that we live is so not
Misaligned.
connected to that.
Yeah.
And I talk about that with my clients at the rehab. We get out, we get our feet bare on the earth, we
Yeah.
watch the grounding movie. You know, they get up early and I'm like, get your naked eyes in the sun. Like,
Hmm.
I can tell you all about why, but just try it. See
Yeah.
how you feel. And that is where
Yeah.
I'm the weird lady at the rehab.
That's
And
good.
people are like, "Why are they walking around barefoot? They need shoes." I'm like, "No. They need to
The
connect to
ground's
the
not dirty.
they need electrons."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's so great to hear because I think there's also a reason that circadian quantum biology world is pushing strong right now because it does feel like it's another massive missing piece. Because you can do all the regulation work in the world, but if you're not going outside and seeing nature and you know what nature is, and you're still completely misaligned with the sun rising and setting, it really has been clear to me that that is key medicine and not just spiritual medicine. You know, the folks that I've gotten to know, like it changes your hormones
Hmm.
fully. So that's exciting. Keep being the weird lady.
I love being the weird lady. It's
I'm the weird lady too. So no.
the weird ones that are gonna create change,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Um, the one thing I did want to ask, which kind of feels like we're going backwards, but I don't think it is. When you started to tell the story of your family with all the addiction and opioids, and someone might go, "Oh, well, it's just genetic."
Mm.
Can you, as someone who has been in that family system where there's so much of that, and I know it is not, it isn't, what's your take on that? What's your thesis on the family system having so much of that? Because if I think about my family system, I don't I don't know anyone in my family who has been an addict in the sense of alcohol or drugs. Like there wasn't even wine at Christmas dinner. We drank juice, you
Hmm.
know. And so it isn't in my field. And so someone might say, "Oh, well, Rachel's history, that's genetic. Irene's, they have heart disease, right?" Which is what comes out in my family. So what's your thoughts on that, my dear?
I don't I so when I was in like the 10th grade, I gave a speech called Alcoholism, the Family Disease, you know, and that was the
Mm,
thing. Oh, it's genetic, right? Like this is passed down. More and more, I don't know if I really believe that anything is truly genetic.
right.
Rather like in our environment, our behaviors, the way that we handle our emotions, the amount of attunement that we receive or don't receive, has an effect on how our genes express. Um, and if it was genetic, like, are we talking like it's alcoholism that's genetic? Does that mean then everyone has the gene for alcoholism? Because, like, not everyone in my family has become an alcoholic, but
Mm-hmm.
I would say that most people in my family have an addiction
Mm-hmm.
of some kind.
Hmm.
And I just think it comes from this. inability to be with what is and finding ways to be okay. Like, I just need to find a way to be okay through a drink or a drug. And in AA, they talk about alcoholics have this phenomenon of craving and an allergy to alcohol, which is another part of the rhetoric of AA that I just kind of go, an allergy to alcohol? Like, I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me, but that's what people say.
Hmm.
Um,
You
and
mean like they're allergic to it so they crave it, or
So I've heard people describe it as as soon as I drink alcohol, I break out in craving
oh, I
and I
see.
can't stop. And
Stop.
that's another thing, like, there's this idea like real alcoholics and real addicts, they get this phenomenon of craving that just can't be stopped.
Right.
One is too many and a thousand's never enough.
Right.
Um, And I think that's like the real like deep end of like addiction.
Hmm.
But the actual definition of addiction is any behavior we keep repeating in spite of the harm that it causes
Right.
and can't,
Can't change.
can't change. So I don't think it has to be that extreme. Um, and I don't think that it is genetic. I think it's more of a lack of attunement
Hmm.
and there is this like lack of faith, and which is the attunement, the
Hmm.
greatest attunement, I
Yeah.
think, that just keeps reaching for something, something, something.
Yeah.
And it's like the trauma that it comes from. Like, my grandfather on my mom's side was adopted. My
Hmm.
grandfather on my dad's side never knew his real father, had a
Wow.
very tumultuous childhood.
Hmm.
My grandmother on my mom's side was the uh, daughter of a mother who was like a child of 13, one of
Wow.
13
Yeah.
children, and her mother was severely depressed. And
Of course.
my grandma, one of her greatest regrets is that she didn't hug her kids more.
Mm.
So, like, there was just,
You can trace it back.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even, you mentioned heart disease, and I know we're not doctors, but what I see so much of people who have heart disease is this like stuck in like a sympathetic activation,
Hmm.
right? Like, there's
Yeah.
so, like, is it genetic, or like did they learn to be that way because their whole family's angry all the time?
Yeah. Oh, or they're so frozen that they're not expressing anything, and that's a stress on the valves, on the
That too.
capillaries. Oh
Yeah.
no, well, I can't verify this, but I was diagnosed with a heart murmur like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and they diagnosed a prolapsed mitral valve. And I remember leading up to that, I was also coming out of freeze, so I also had a lot of sympathetic going on. I talk about this in my recent chat with my husband, so we'll link that. But when I got the diagnosis, things shifted.
Mm.
But then I noticed that I would feel this activation in certain positions. So I'm like, okay, maybe this is structural. I'll accept that. But I'm going to find out what I have to do to not have this, I called it blip in my heart where it would just spike. It wasn't like AFib or anything like that. It was just high. And then I was reading Trauma Spectrum by Robert Scare. And I
Hmm.
found a passage in that book. That book is so not recognized enough, in my opinion, where he had a thought that prolapse mitral valve was also a factor due to dysregulation. It just like IBS, just
Mm-hmm.
like cystitis. So basically, the valves don't know how to function in sync. And as I've worked with this, like I've really, like when I go to exercise, if I feel it, I know to back off or to expand my diaphragms, not just the breath one,
Yeah.
all of them, and I can mitigate it. And
Mm.
so I went and saw my doctor months and months ago, and like, I could tell she was, because she's the one that diagnosed it. And
She's like,
she's like, I can't find it. And she was stumped. And I haven't done all the other measurements because they had me hooked up to all these things and doing movements with an EKG on, and I'm like, maybe it's gone. Just the way people heal IBS, just the way people heal cystitis, just the way some of your peers have healed autoimmune diseases that they were told they would never get rid of. So
mm-hmm.
I'm like, I can't wait to get that test because I want to know. Like, I actually want to go and get the test. And if it is still there, then whatever, it's still there and that's fine. So to go back to the heart disease thing, I agree. I mean, diet is a piece too, with all the bad seed oils and just processed foods. But the cardiovascular system is under massive stress when we are not attuned and
Mm-hmm.
we're frozen and we're living in sympathetic overdrive all the time, which
Mm-hmm.
is kind of the norm.
Yeah. Yeah, that go, go, go. Like we were talking about before, the
Yeah.
difference that I feel in the States versus
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
Yes.
And I know we're running short on time. I
That's
wanted to
okay.
mention one more thing. I think it's so cool about the heart thing, and
Mm,
I'm very curious to hear what happens.
mm,
You mentioned IBS, and I had been diagnosed with IBS. This was before my cancer experience.
yeah.
And even after, I mean, it took a while for my digestion to regulate, and I definitely notice, like, I can tell what's happening in my nervous system and my digestion and how it's tied together.
Yeah.
And I had went for it was at the beginning of last year. I had like my system got like totally whacked. I didn't know what was happening and
Mhm.
I was doing everything to get it moving. I went in for a colonic and I was looking at a picture of healthy intestines, right?
Right.
And then unhealthy intestines and they're all twisted. And I
Yeah.
used to have this dream when I was a kid. And I've had digestive issues all my life. And it was silly putty, silly putty like the clay
Hmm.
stuff. And
Hmm.
it was moving and
Yeah.
twisting on this like dingy background. And I would tell my mom like I can't sleep. I just can't stop thinking. And I just saw the silly putty all twisted. I saw the intestines all twisted. And I was like, oh shit, as above, so below. Like those thoughts, the anxiety I was experiencing
Hmm.
in the mind, showing
Hmm.
up in my belly, showing up in my
Hmm.
digestion,
Hmm.
my nervous system being just all this,
Yeah.
uh, no, no flow, no peace. And I also started working with clay right around that
Um,
time
yeah. Yeah.
started using that because I was like, oh, this is like silly putty. So I would feel the smoothness, and my digestion
Changed.
changed.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
What what I really want to highlight there, thank you for sharing that, is people talk about art therapy, and art, and but again, you can do the art therapy, but if you're not connecting it to the psyche and the physiology, it's nice art. You're doing something, but so you're right, so much can be done when we have that connection to our inner self. I think that's why play therapy is so good for kids. Not that adults can't do it either, but when you let them really act out their traumas through, you know, figurines or cars or scribbling or tearing things,
Hmm.
it's very effective. But again, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about before about your clients and being allowed to express anger
Hmm.
and know how to connect with what they're feeling as opposed to just, we're going to do crafts today. We're going to do volleyball today. We're going to do therapy today.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
glad your guts are better. It's good.
Thank you. Me too. It's not fun having stomach problems. All the IBS sufferers out there, I feel you.
You know,
And
it's sorry, what's interesting, I just remembered the only time I had gut problems was when I was put on a, oh, I don't know what it's called, an antacid.
mhm.
I had choked quite badly on some food, obviously, and my doctor suspects I had bruised my esophagus.
Ooh.
It was really painful, and I could feel the acid. So her thought was it might not be a bad idea to go on an antacid just for a little bit. And so I agreed because it was really uncomfortable. Like I choked pretty badly. Poor Seth was terrified when this
I
happened.
bet.
And I have never had such bad constipation
Mm.
after because it just shut my entire digestion down.
Mhm.
And then I thought, wow, how many people live on these things and have no clue that their poor bowels are being affected by this. Anyway,
Mhm.
it was like one of the only times I've taken like a pharmaceutical for something acutely that it wasn't say an antibiotic or right. And it just showed me the power of those drugs to change something. And yeah, my esophagus definitely healed, but the downstream effect was horrendous.
Yeah. I'm glad you're okay from the choking.
Thank
That's
you.
terrifying. I've choked.
It was brutal.
Yeah.
I can laugh about it now, but it was crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a scary event.
Hmm.
And what you said, I don't think that Western medicine really I don't know. I don't know what they think, right? I'm not going to speculate.
No.
But like whenever we take something, it's a system.
Yeah.
So I've had people ask me, people at the rehab, like, "Oh, do you think we should?" They're giving me melatonin. Should I supplement melatonin? And of course, I'm like, because you supplement melatonin, and like you're putting something into a
Yeah.
system that has a rhythm, and like there's always going to be some kind of effect.
Yep.
Maybe the effect that we want, but there's going to be other effects on the system
Hmm.
as
Hmm.
well that might do more harm than good.
Yeah.
And that doesn't often get talked about, or at least it hasn't for me when I've been in
Mm-mm.
a doctor's office.
No.
And my acupuncturists and more holistic practitioners, yes.
Yeah.
But Western medicine still has this like we're parts of a machine
Yeah.
view.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you, Irene. It's been really great.
It's
I
been
know we
good to
went a
catch
little
up.
long.
Yeah. I want you to keep me updated on the weird lady therapy you do with your people. Any final things that you would like to say to those listening? We've covered a lot of diversity in in our chat, and also the one we did before. So I really recommend people watch our first interview from we think a couple years ago.
Yeah,
Um,
whenever that was. Just that the nervous system work is so important. There's not a day that goes by that I don't apply something that I learned
Mhm.
from your program.
Mhm.
And even let's see, it's 2024. I
Mhm.
just signed up to be a part of SBSM again. And when I go through it, I don't do all the things, but
Yeah.
like I kind of drop in and it's perfect when I do drop in, you know?
Mhm.
Um, but every year it lands more and more just how the basics are so freaking important.
Mhm.
And when I started, I was a little skeptical on that. Like, really orienting? Like, oh, what? Or just the diaphragms are one of my favorite
Mhm.
parts of it. I think because I tend to get kind of frozen up here. So it's one I return to, and it's one that I
Yeah.
see. I used it in a session with my clients recently.
Yeah.
Led my own version because I noticed when
Good.
we were doing yoga, there was a lot of inverted breathing. They're
Yeah.
like, oh, your belly doesn't come in when you breathe in. I'm like, no. So yeah, it's those simple things
Yeah.
are really they're essential. That's why you teach
Yeah.
the essentials and all those things. And um, oh gosh, there's like a little bit more I want to say, like just about
Please. Okay.
addiction. I talked about addiction, and I'm working with people who, like, because we're a lockdown facility, they're like the toughest to crack cases,
Mm.
and they've went to like the darkest depths. But I think that anyone who struggles with like drugs or alcohol can benefit from like the nervous system work and shouldn't feel like they don't have a place in any of the 12-step programs,
Mhm.
or they're not like bad enough to have help,
Yeah.
because that kind of gets out there. Um, in my view of the world, most of us are addicted to something.
Mhm.
So, yeah, anyway, and people can follow me on Instagram. If you
Right. We'll
post my
do that.
Instagram thing at Unraveling Rachel. I write and share things there
Yeah.
sometime.
Your posts are good. Cool. Thank you. No, I appreciate that. And, um, you know, we don't have a portion of my site that says these are all the people that healed from this and these are all the people that healed from this. It just seems like there's a macro shift in people's systems, and over time, yes, the breathing, the digestion, the survival stress, the addictions, the relationships, it all just kind of inches forward. And so it's virtually impossible for me, from my experience, to say that's the addiction person and that's the chronic illness person, because they all kind of are just together.
Hmm.
And it's really that, what is that saying? When you can't see the forest for the trees, like it's so much bigger than just healing that one problem that society says is bad.
Hmm.
It's this holistic reclamation of our, as woo as this sounds, as our birthright to be free and
Hmm.
liberated and sovereign and healthy.
Hmm.
And it's like we've been living in these dark ages of illness since industrialized living. And it's like, yeah, I feel like we're finally moving out of it. It's going to take some time, but I do
Hmm.
feel like it's shifting in a positive direction, despite everyone saying that everything's going to hell. I don't believe that. I believe things are going in the right direction. And I know that from my students, hearing stories from you, and just being like, no, there's a lot of healing going on.
There's so much healing going on, and maybe that's my bubble. I was talking with a friend. I was like, I've become the positive person. Like, I am seeing all the good happening, and really, like, I am being some of the good happening. And the more, like, every individual person heals, the more the planet heals. I like your analogy of like, we're all like the cells of the planet,
Hmm.
and the ripple effect that comes
Yeah.
out. I use this with my clients all the time when we're doing our yoga, doing our healing.
Mhm.
Like, this is it, and it is happening. It's a it's a mindset shift, um, too. That getting out of that, oh, the world's going to hell. Like, well, look around, really.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
some goodness there. There's a lot of goodness.
Hmm.
All right.
This is a lot of goodness. Thank you, Irene.
You're welcome. Thank you. And we'll be in touch.
Okay.